Following their defeat in the battle at Rook's Rest, the Black Council of Queen Rhaenyra criticized her for raising no ground armies and driving away her husband, Daemon Targaryen, who was actively recruiting soldiers. Most vocal of all was Sir Alfred Broome, who spoke ill of women for not studying warfare, while she replied his own training was merely theoretical as he had not actually experienced combat. Though Rhaenyra sent support to her allies in Maidenpool and Crackclaw Point, instructing them to increase their garrisons, the Black Council was not satisfied and began to argue among themselves, leaving the Queen unable to control her people or demand respect. Frustrated his mother would not allow him to participate in the war, Jacaerys convinced his betrothed Baela Targaryen to cover for him while he departed for the Riverlands on his own initiative, where he successfully negotiated with House Frey, offering them Harrenhal and the protection of their dragons in exchange for military support and the use of their bridge to transport soldiers from the north. Retreating from her small council, Rhaenyra instead sought advice from her spy master Mysaria, who suggested they exploit the discontent of small folk in the capital caused by their blockade, sending a servant to provoke them with rumors of the Greens enjoying luxuries while the commoners starved, then amplifying this propaganda with shipments of food featuring the Queen's banner, masterfully turning the population against Aegon II. Realizing her most influential supporter, Corlys Velaryon, was devastated after the loss of Rhaenys, the Queen sent his granddaughter Baela to appoint him Hand of the Queen, convincing him to stay loyal for sake of his wife who died for their cause. Corlys was so impressed by her words he wanted Baela as his heir, but she claimed to be fire and blood, while Driftmark required salt and sea. Considering her words, Corlys promoted his illegitimate son Alyn to first mate of his flagship the Sea Snake, which was undergoing repairs and when completed was renamed the Queen Who Never Was. Understanding she must start making more consequential decisions, Rhaenyra cleverly sent Sir Alfred Broome to establish contact with Daemon in the Riverlands, thereby removing her most vocal detractor from the small council, while engaging in necessary diplomacy with her husband, whose loyalty was uncertain. Yet even after a series of wise decisions, the Queen needed to secure a more substantial advantage to counter the threat of Vhagar, and after a discussion with her son Jacaerys, decided to seek out noble-born dragon seeds, hoping those with trace amounts of Targaryen blood might succeed in bonding a dragon to fight on her behalf. Researching bloodlines, she discovered the Lord Commander of her Queen's Guard, Sir Steffon Darklyn, was a candidate, as his grandmother's grandmother Arianna was a Targaryen princess. Without hesitation, Sir Steffon accepted the mission, and alongside the Dragon Keepers, participated in a bonding ritual with Seasmoke, who at first seemed receptive, but ultimately rejected the claimant and burned him alive. Shaken by this loss, Rhaenyra continued to seek counsel almost exclusively from Mysaria, who revealed the trauma of her childhood in which she was abused by her father. Growing closer, the two began a secret relationship, but were interrupted by the Queen's Guard, who revealed Seasmoke was spotted with an unknown rider. Fearing the Greens had a new ally, Rhaenyra mounted Syrax and flew to confront this potential enemy, but instead discovered the dragon chose Addam of Hull, a common-born man from Driftmark, as his rider. The secret, illegitimate son of Lord Corlys, Addam was quick to bend the knee and offer his services to the Queen, who readily accepted, and after another discussion with Mysaria, concluded they must search among the small folk for those with Targaryen blood, in the hope others might duplicate the success of her new dragon rider. Learning what occurred, Corlys congratulated Addam and informed Alyn, even offering him a chance to tame a dragon of his own. But the young man only ever sought to be a sailor, proudly declaring himself salt and sea. Though impressed by his words, Corlys quickly tired of Alyn's negative attitude, seeming ungrateful for his promotion and the opportunities being offered. Upon hearing this complaint, Alyn's suppressed anger finally bubbled to the surface, explaining he grew up watching Corlys and his family living in luxury while he and his brothers struggled every day, receiving no aid or acknowledgement from their father. Yet only now that his legitimate children and grandson were dead did he offer the crumbs of his favor, thus why Alyn had no interest in any offers of help. Similarly, Rhaenyra was soon confronted by her own son Jacaerys, who argued it was a mistake to seek dragon riders among the small folk, as it would greatly harm Targaryen prestige, which alongside the rumors of his bastard birth, threatened his legitimacy and position as heir. Although the queen failed to reassure her son, Jace instead found strength from his betrothed Vale Targaryen, who reminded him he was not the first nobleman sired under unusual circumstances, encouraging him to prove his worth and earn his place as the future king of Westeros. Using her contacts to locate bastard-born smallfolk of Targaryen blood, Mysaria brought a group of candidates from the capital, including Ulf the White and Hugh Hammer, who recently lost his daughter to illness and confessed his mother was Sarah Targaryen, the disavowed daughter of King Jacaerys who worked as a prostitute. Outraged by the queen's audacity, the Dragon Keepers refused to participate in the sowing of the seeds, leaving Rhaenyra to navigate the event on her own, explaining their purpose before sending all the candidates at once to attempt bonding the great dragon Vermithor, formerly claimed by King Jacaerys Targaryen. Rejecting the first man to approach, Vermithor burned many of the small folk and guards, creating such chaos those who survived quickly scattered and fled. Yet upon seeing Vermithor about to harm a defenseless woman, Hugh Hammer caused a distraction and saved her life, directly challenging the dragon, who was impressed by his courage and accepted his claim. Yet Hugh was not the only dragon seed to find success, as Ulf the White fled the carnage only to stumble into the lair of Silverwing, the maid of Vermithor, formerly ridden by Queen Alicent Targaryen. Stepping on an egg and tripping into a puddle of piss, Ulf somehow impressed the she-dragon who accepted his bond. As all this went on, the Greens celebrated their victory at Rook's Rest by parading the head of Meleys through the streets of the capital, yet it had the opposite effect they intended, as the small folk saw an ill omen, fearing Rhaenyra's response to this outrage. Horrified to learn the fate of her son, Alicent watched the maesters treat his burns and severe wounds, unable to learn the truth of what occurred, as even her lover Criston Cole repeated the lie Aegon fought bravely and fell in battle with Rhaenys. Attending a meeting of the small council, the Queen Mother attempted to name herself Regent, but found support only from Grand Maester Orwyle, with even her closest allies, Larys Strong and Criston Cole, voting for Aemond as the king's heir, stating they could not deny Rhaenyra's claim only to elevate a woman as their leader. Eagerly accepting the regency, Aemond soon received a letter from Lord Jason Lannister, who stated he would keep his army at the border of the Riverlands until joined by Vhagar. Offended by his demands, Aemond sent back orders to continue marching forward, while also sending Criston Cole with what remained of their forces, thereby attacking Harrenhal in a pincer move from west and south, promising to join them on his dragon when the time was ripe. The Regent also decided to send Jason's twin, Tywin Lannister, on a mission to the Triarchy of Essos, where he promised trade rights to King's Landing and relinquished the Westerosi claim to the Stepstones in exchange for a fleet to break the Valyrian blockade. During his time in Essos, Tywin befriended Sharako Lohar, the eccentric admiral of the Triarchy Fleet, and together set sail for King's Landing. Learning his brother Aegon was slowly recovering, Aemond subtly threatened further harm, prompting the king to claim no memory of what occurred at Rook's Rest. Hoping to take advantage of the new power dynamic in the capital, Larys Strong sought to be selected as the new hand of the king, only for the regent to mock his ambitions, instead sending for his grandfather, Sir Otto Hightower, to retake the position. Yet this proved impossible, as Otto was taken captive by unknown assailants sometime after leaving the capital. Embarrassed and enraged by Aemond's flippant dismissal, Larys changed tactics and re-established contact with the king, preventing addiction to milk of the poppy while teaching him the harsh reality of living with a disability. Working with Grand Maester Orwyle, they rehabilitated Aegon to one day retake the throne, at which point he would no doubt continue to rely on Larys Strong as his closest advisor. Reluctantly accepting Aemond as regent, Alicent started to panic upon realizing the realm was in the hands of her violent, vengeance-obsessed son, and upon vocalizing her reservations, was swiftly dismissed from the small council. Told to focus on more domestic pursuits, the Queen Mother bid farewell to her brother Gwayne Hightower as he marched for the Riverlands, but said nothing to Criston Cole, merely exchanging a silent look before they parted. En route to Harrenhal, Gwayne confronted Sir Criston at sword point, accusing him of breaking his vows with Alicent. Yet the Lord Commander proved a broken shell of his former self, explaining she saved his life on 2 occasions, and so entirely devoted himself to her, though it no longer mattered, as they would likely die on campaign. Sir Gwayne was so shocked by Criston's self-loathing and nihilistic attitude, he lowered his sword and made peace with the situation. As tensions bubbled over in the capital, both Helaena and Alicent were accosted by angry smallfolk while leaving the Great Sept. A small altercation which turned into a full-blown riot when one of the poorly trained Kingsguard killed a commoner and was in turn slaughtered by the mob. Barely escaping with their lives, Alicent heard cries of Queen Rhaenyra as they fled to the castle. Struggling to accept her diminished responsibilities, Alicent camped out in the forest to reflect on the next stage of her life. Back in the Red Keep, the Iron Rod Lord Jasper Wilde heard rumor the dragon Seasmoke had a new rider, and so consulted Larys Strong, seeking his advice as Master of Whispers. Upon learning the report passed through multiple people before reaching them, Larys suggested they say nothing, possibly fearing the wrath of Aemond, regardless if it was true or not. Yet this decision soon resulted in serious consequences, as the Regent was caught completely unprepared when Ulf the White rode Silverwing directly over King's Landing, which then provoked Aemond to mount Vhagar and fly to Dragonstone, where he was shocked to see multiple dragons and Dragonriders, forcing him to flee as Rhaenyra watched defiantly with Syrax, Vermithor, and Silverwing at her back. Furious to have lost his advantage, Aemond responded by burning Black Allied Sharppoint, during which time Larys snuck King Aegon out of the city to Braavos, where they could live off the wealth of House Strong, explaining the Regent was enraged and might take out his frustration on the king. Thus they must evacuate, in the hope Aemond and Rhaenyra destroy each other, at which time Aegon could return and take his place on the Iron Throne. Desperate for more Dragonriders, Aemond attempted to force his sister Helaena to mount Dreamfire, one of the oldest and most powerful dragons alive, but the queen refused and was defended by her mother Alicent, as Helaena had a fragile mind and was in no way a warrior. Back on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra thought simply possessing more Dragonriders might force the enemy into submission, but after speaking with Corlys Velaryon, realized she must fight to secure victory. Organizing a dinner with her new Dragonriders, she promised knighthood in exchange for their service. Yet while both Hugh and Addam showed humility and respect, Ulf the White acted without civility, angering Jacaerys, who twice corrected his behavior. It was during their dinner that Rhaenyra received a letter from Sir Simon Strong, a loyal servant who warned Daemon Targaryen might be plotting treason by raising armies for his own claim rather than that of the queen. Alarmed, Rhaenyra mounted Syrax and flew to Harrenhal, bringing Addam and Seasmoke instead of her son and heir. Over in the Riverlands, after Daemon Targaryen made a deal with House Blackwood, he attempted to intimidate House Bracken by threatening Dragonfire, but they steadfastly refused to submit, impressing the king consort who wanted them recruited rather than destroyed, instructing Sir Willem Blackwood to wage a campaign of total war, burning and pillaging religious septs and farmland while slaughtering their peasants, including women and children. Though these tactics succeeded in defeating the Brackens, Daemon faced backlash from the other river lords, who denounced such barbarity and refused to follow a leader that sanctioned such behavior. Meanwhile, the rogue prince continued to suffer disturbing dreams and visions, seeing himself engage intimately with his own mother, as well as several incidents with his brother, including Viserys on the Iron Throne, repeating words from past confrontations, mourning his deceased wife Aemma Arryn, and as a sickly old man talking about the crushing weight of the crown. Despite trying to ignore these visions, Daemon struggled to function normally, showing little patience or competence when dealing with the administration of Harrenhal, learning from Simon Strong they were in need of coin for castle repairs and preparations for war. Though Sir Simon suggested contacting the Queen for assistance, Daemon refused, insisting he would secure funding on his own. Seeking advice from the healer Alice Rivers, she declared it a mistake to unleash such devastation against House Bracken, but eventually instructed him to wait 3 more days and the tide would turn in his favor. During this time, Alice Rivers traveled to Riverrun, supposedly to help Lord Grover Tully, but instead caused his death, allowing young Oscar Tully to succeed his grandfather and meet with Daemon about supporting the Blacks. Yet while the boy was young and inexperienced, he proved remarkably wise and cunning, expertly belittling Daemon while also manipulating the situation to denounce the extreme tactics used against House Bracken, thus gaining the respect of the other river lords while forcing Daemon to punish Willem Blackwood in exchange for their support. Embarrassed, outmatched, and outmaneuvered by Oscar Tully, Daemon saw no alternative and so beheaded the Regent of House Blackwood, betraying his most loyal ally to win the army he so desperately desired. As their warriors gathered at Harrenhal, Daemon was visited by Sir Alfred Broome, originally sent on behalf of Rhaenyra, only to betray her by encouraging Daemon to declare himself king. Overhearing their conversation, Sir Simon wrote to Rhaenyra, prompting her and Addam of Hull to depart Dragonstone for the Riverlands. Yet before she arrived, Daemon, with the help of Alice Rivers, touched a weirwood tree to see a final vision featuring the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, including images of war with the White Walkers, Daenerys Targaryen with her dragons, and his wife Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne. When the vision ended, Daemon made peace with his inner demons and understood his true destiny, realizing he must serve the queen and fight for her cause so the realm would be prepared to face a future invasion that'll threaten all of humanity. Confronted by Rhaenyra, Daemon offered no resistance and readily bent the knee, promising his support before delivering an enthusiastic speech to his men, declaring they fight for their queen as the army cheered in response. Relieved she now had a ground army, Rhaenyra returned to Dragonstone, where she was unexpectedly visited by the Queen Mother, Alicent Hightower, who felt depressed after losing her position of authority, and so snuck out of the capital with a single Kingsguard companion to betray her own family by submitting to the Blacks. At first, she offered to surrender the capital when Aemond flew to the Riverlands, but Rhaenyra also demanded the death of King Aegon. Though hesitant, Alicent agreed to help murder the son she put on the throne in exchange for her own life and that of her daughter Helaena. As all this went on, Rhaena Targaryen struggled with her mission in the Vale, facing backlash from Lady Jane Arryn, who offered support in exchange for a dragon to protect her territory, but was instead given two babies, Tyraxis and Stormcloud, incapable of large-scale combat. Unhappy with her position and past failure to tame a dragon, Rhaena soon learned Lady Jane sought protection because there was already a wild dragon roaming the Vale. Successfully contacting the Prince of Pentos, the Targaryen children were sent to safety across the Narrow Sea, but Rhaena instead ran away from her responsibilities, leaving her brothers on their own while she sped away, searching for and eventually finding the wild dragon to once again attempt forming a bond. Thus, after weeks of slow preparation, the continent was at last on the verge of open warfare, including the Green-allied Triarchy Fleet sailing from Essos, the Hightower army marching through the Reach alongside Daemon Targaryen on Tessarion, the Lannister host marching into the Riverlands from the west, while Criston Cole's forces did the same from the south, and Aemond One-Eye ever ready to fight on Vhagar. At the same time, the Blacks made their own moves, including the continued Valyrian blockade of the capital, House Beesbury aiming to counter the Hightowers in the Reach, Daemon's host forming at Harrenhal, House Frey and the Winter Wolves marching from the north, and the Dragonriders, Rhaenyra, Jacaerys, Baela, Addam of Hull, Hugh Hammer, and Ulf the White preparing for combat. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Raj the Jar, Barachado, Sir Rick Lone, and Lady J Booknerd. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/CivilizationEx, where you can gain early access to videos, vote on future content, and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.